You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise and Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and first off, you guys were so sweet. So many of you messaged, wishing for me to enjoy my time in Arizona with my grandson, Asher. And you guys, it was wonderful. I spent the whole week with him and Peyton and Garrett, along with my daughter Marley and her husband Colton, and also some dear friends. We all enjoyed the Olivia Rodrigo concert together. Big thank you to Peyton and Garrett for inviting all of us. So all in all, it was such a wonderful trip. But while I was away, my hometown in Idaho had an epic snowstorm. There were down power lines, closed roads. So as I flew in on Saturday night, my small plane was filled with skiers that couldn't fly to Jackson Hole. So they ended up on my plane coming into Idaho Falls. And my hometown airport, it's pretty small. It's not like an airport you can hang out in. It's just there to get you to and from, and that's it. So as I was waiting for my luggage, the nicest young woman named Alicia was talking with others around us, saying that her boyfriend was stuck on a highway that was closed due to the snow. And I offered up the most unsound advice that a true crime podcaster could give. I told her that I wasn't a serial killer and that I would give her a ride to our local Applebee's that's kind of situated right there along the Snake River, and it's nestled in between several hotels. And that way she could get a drink that she said she so desperately needed. And also that way her boyfriend could pick her up there, or if he couldn't get through on the closed highway, she could just spend the evening in one of those hotels that were just a very short walking distance away. So she took me up on it, and my husband and I safely delivered her to Applebee's. And for all of you listeners, don't ever take anyone else up on that offer. That was a bad offer that I gave, but hopefully Alicia and her boyfriend are reunited and she's made it to her snowy destination. All right, that leads right into today's story. You know, me saying I wasn't a serial killer. Well, this is about a serial killer, and we have too many of them lurking out there. And when I was researching this story, it reminded me of the Long Island serial killer. So that case I've covered multiple times because it's in the middle of the legal system right now. It also reminded me of that strange Portland serial killer case where they have the guy locked up on other charges, but they haven't charged him with the 5 murders in the Portland area yet, making me go, do they even have the right guy? And who knows? It's one of those cases I'm watching. And also there's that bizarre Austin case where there's been lots of murders by the river and they don't have an explanation for that yet. But this serial killer, this one's out of Canada, Robert Pickton. He's in prison for the serial murders that he committed in the 90s. But are they going to let him out of prison? So let's revisit the pig farmer killer. Robert Pickton was born in 1949 into a very disturbed household. His mother and father owned and operated a pig farm near Vancouver, and his mother would treat the pigs better than she would treat Robert and his brother David. Now, they had a sister named Linda, and she'd been sent away to live with relatives. So it was just Robert and David growing up in filth and muck, attending school as young boys covered in manure because they were required to do the chores on the farm before school, but their mother would not help the boys clean up before sending them off for the day. This led to kids at school calling them stinky piggies. But as we see in other mentally compromised killers, Robert had an unnatural need or want for his mother's attention. He also would do everything to not interact with his abusive father. So one day, Robert returned from school and he couldn't find his pet calf that he loved dearly. When his mother told him to check the barn, he was shattered to find that his parents had slaughtered his pet. I tell you this part of his life so that you can maybe just contextualize but not condone his future serial killer rage. Well, in 1994, Robert and his brother David inherited the farm. They quickly sold a portion of the land and they became more affluent with the new money. Yet the pig farm was still under their operation. Now, it's important to understand the geographical location of the farm. It's located near the east side of Vancouver in an area known as Low Track. And Low Track is comparable to, like, say, Skid Row in Los Angeles. highly drug infested. There's homelessness, and it's often frequented by women engaging in sex work. And all of that made for fertile territory for a serial killer. And if you're going to rape and murder a woman, but you don't want to get caught, targeting a sex worker or a homeless woman tends to offer you some security because, as wrong as it might be, law enforcement doesn't always tediously work to find those who don't want to be found. And with fewer family or friends watching out for the sex workers, that also makes for an easier target. In fact, in the 90s in Vancouver, surrounding areas had even passed laws meant to corral or force sex workers and drug users into the low-track area. So the thoughts were by lawmakers to push all those homeless and drug-using members into one area. And Robert fully understood this, and he seemed to take full advantage of the low-track area. And this wasn't just 1 or 2 women that went missing from low-track. This was dozens. And law enforcement didn't act on, and in some ways blatantly ignored, the trend of disappearing women for several years. So who were these women? I'm going to name several because they deserve that at a minimum. But it's not an all-inclusive list, you guys. We can't be here all day. I just want to bring notice to some of those women. And I honestly wish we could learn more about each one of them and offer them more respect. But at least we'll give them identities and recognition. So in 1983, 23-year-old Rebecca Guno went missing. In 84, 43-year-old Sherry Rell went missing, but she wasn't reported as missing for nearly 3 years. 33-year-old Elaine Auerbach went missing in 1986. And in 1988, 26-year-old Teresa Ann Williams was last seen alive, but not reported as missing for nearly a year. In 1989, Ingrid Suet went missing, but it took 14 months before anyone notified police. And this is just a few of the disappearances before 1991. And in that year, a couple of detectives started to raise the alarm to the steady rise in numbers of missing women. But guess what happened to those 2 detectives? They were demoted for attempting to raise the awareness. Now, law enforcement seemed to be taking the stance of, if we don't notice it, then it isn't happening. And then in June of 1992, Kathleen Watley, who was 39 years old, well, she went missing. And then the disappearances, they slowed for nearly 3 years. But when 1995 rolled around, they revved right back up again. That year, 47-year-old Catherine Gonzalez went missing, but she wasn't reported for more than a year. And then Catherine Knight vanished in 1995 as well. Also in 95, 36-year-old Dorothy Spence and 23-year-old Diana Melnick were last seen alive. In 1996, we had 2 more women go missing from low track, 24-year-old Tanya Halleck and 22-year-old Olivia Williams. And in 1997, Stephanie Lane went missing. And are you ready for this next one? Because it's double the heartbreak. Back in the 80s, Janet Henry escaped a serial killer named Alfred Olson. But less than a decade later, she went missing from low track in 1997. She survived one serial killer, and then she fell victim to another. Now, these are the stories that make me so thankful for the safe and loving surroundings that I've been blessed with. These are humans who are trying to make this life work. Whether they make bad decisions or they're just trying to survive, I'm not here to determine that. But they are human, and they deserved better. Now, not all of them are sex workers, but most of them are. And most are mothers trying to provide for their young children. Some are white, some are Native American, one woman was Black. So the killer isn't a respecter of persons, but he is someone who targets those with less. And he just keeps going. Because in 1997, 32-year-old Helen Hallmark, 25-year-old Marnie Frey, and 28-year-old Jacqueline Murdoch all went missing. Now, these are just a few of the 50 to 60 women that went missing in more than a decade of ignored issues in low track. Finally, law enforcement began addressing the disappearance of women. But how do they do that when they look at the issue originally? Well, following pressure from various groups and family members, they originally put out a list of women that are missing, but then they say that you can't assume they are murdered. They say some left the area, some died from disease or overdose. So bothered by that explanation, one detective, Dave Dixon, he started to whittle down the list to those who could be identified as found or still missing. And once he had worked on it, he was disturbed to see that the number was still massive. And then the detective got a break. In 1998, a recovering drug addict that was trying to get his life back together, his name's Bill Hiscox. Well, he took a job at the P&B salvage yard owned by David and Robert Picton of Picton Pig Farm. He got the job via his foster sister. See, because she was the on-again, off-again love interest of Robert Picton. Well, Bill, that worker, he became familiar with the farm when he would go there to grab his paycheck from Robert. And he would tell authorities that the farm was creepy. And I would too, because the farm was patrolled by a guard pig. You heard me right there. A 600-pound boar that would attack if that boar felt threatened. Well, Bill also said Robert was kind of a quiet guy that really couldn't carry a conversation, and he would act weirdly in large groups, but he seemed to be more appropriate socially when talking with women one-on-one. He also explained to detectives that Robert drove a converted bus with tinted windows that he loved more than anything in life. And then here's another weird detail. The Picton brothers also ran a charity called the Piggy Palace Good Time Society. Yeah, the Piggy Palace Good Time Society. They billed this operation as a nonprofit that organized and coordinated events and parties for businesses that are in need. And according to the locals, those special events that happened at the Piggy Palace, which was a building on the pig farm that they converted into a place to host these parties, well, the locals said it's actually just drunken raves with sex workers as the provided entertainment. So they weren't actually a nonprofit doing good. They just listed themselves as a nonprofit to get away with it. Well, Bill alerted police to the weirdness at the Picton Farms after reading an article in the local paper about sex workers that had gone missing. And this is when it all began to collapse for Robert. In 1997, police, after investigating the farm and its bad business dealings, well, they actually linked Robert to a kidnapping and an attempted murder of a sex worker named Wendy Lynn. Okay, here's how that story went down. Wendy was at the farm when Robert stabbed her multiple times, but she fought back. She wrestled the knife away from Robert and she stabbed him before running from the farm. Well, a passing motorist found her on the side of the highway in the early morning hours, and that motorist took her to the local hospital. So what did investigators do? Well, they started watching for a man to show up with a stab wound, and that's exactly what Robert did. He went to the hospital. But are you ready for this? Investigators chose to drop the charges against Robert for the attempted murder of Wendy. And who knows why? I couldn't figure out. But armed with Bill, the employee, armed with his information about Robert and how he had a stash of sex workers' personal belongings, like purses and IDs at the trailer on the farm, detectives then go and search the farm. But it was too late. Robert had purged the evidence after the stabbing. So there's no more purses and there's no more IDs. And 1997 goes on, and so does 98 and 99 and the year 2000 and 2001. And more women go missing. Finally, in 2002, Robert found himself in trouble with the law again for illegal possession of guns, and those charges opened a door for Constable Catherine Galford to search the Picton farm again. Well, following the search, Robert was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the presumed deaths of Serena Abbots and Mona Wilson. Both of those women had gone missing in 1997. As more DNA evidence was collected from the farm, 3 more first-degree murder charges were added for the presumed deaths of Jacqueline McDonald, Diane Rock, and Heather Bottomley. Then, a few weeks later, 2 more first-degree murder charges were added for Brenda Wolfe and Andrea Joesborough. So that's 7 total. But more DNA evidence was unearthed, literally. The evidence was found buried, and it was also found in freezers, and in totes, and in garbage cans, all over that farm, and murder charges were filed for Georgina Pegman, Patricia Johnson, Helen Hallmark, and Jennifer Firminger. Then even more charges were added. Heather Chinnock, Tanya Holyoke, Sherry Irving, and Inga Hall. So we're at 15 now. But then, a few months later, even more charges were filed for the presumed deaths of Kara Ellis, Andrea Borhaven, Deborah Lynn Jones, Marnie Frey, Tiffany Drew, Carrie Koski, Sarah DeVries, Cynthia Felix, Angela Jardine, Wendy Crawford, Diana Melnick, and then a Jane Doe. That's 27 first-degree murder charges. So much excavation work was done at the farm that the cost of the investigation reached over $70 million, and the work was messy. It was found that Robert had ground up the flesh of the humans and mixed it with the pork meat that was sold to individual buyers. Investigators also claimed that the humans were fed to the pigs. Okay, there's more gruesome details, you guys, but I'm just going to leave it at that because you get the picture. This was a disgusting human doing disgusting things. All in all, DNA and remains for 33 women were collected from the farm. In 2006, Robert went to trial. He had pled not guilty to all 27 charges, and the legal entanglements began. When I said we went to trial in 2006, it took almost a full year for that system to decide what could actually be admitted as evidence. Wow, you guys, I complain about the justice system grinding slowly in America. Canada has it going on also. During that year, the judge, he decided to split up the charges. He dismissed one charge for lack of evidence, and then he scooped another 20 charges into their own group, and that left 6 first-degree murder charges that the judge felt the jurors could absorb and understand. Well, at the trial for the 6 women, for Frey, Abbotsway, Papin, Joesbury, Wolfe, and Wilson. Well, at that trial, the details are just frankly too disturbing to share, but I will give you just a couple. The video evidence that was admitted that showed Robert and a friend named Scott Chubb discussing how best to kill women who have drug addictions was horrible. On that video, they are found saying that Robert could inject those women with windshield wiper fluid in order to kill them. And then in another tape, Robert could be seen saying that he would kill sex workers by handcuffing them and strangling them. And some of the evidence established was a garbage can at Robert's property that held the remains of Mona Wilson. Okay, that's just a small amount of the gruesome details that investigators found on that property. But I'm about to blow your mind. The jury found Robert not guilty on the 6 charges of first-degree murder. Instead, they found him guilty of the lesser charge of second-degree murder. Okay, everyone, just take a deep breath after I gave you that news. But initially, the judge ruled that Robert would spend life in prison without parole due to the heinous nature of the crimes, even though it was only second-degree murder. But after the appeals process, Robert has now become eligible for parole. And that brings us to the update. Last week, Robert hit that date where he became eligible for parole, and his hearing should be scheduled soon, meaning there is a small chance he will get out of prison at the age of 74. And for the surviving family members, the possibility of Robert Pickton, the serial killer, walking free is nearly too much to bear. On Thursday, those family members held a candlelight vigil at the land where the pig farm once stood in order to remember their loved ones. And Tanya Holyoke's cousin told a local newspaper at that vigil that the fact that the judicial system is even allowing him the opportunity to apply for parole is just horrific. She said the judicial system is racist and that this behavior just exemplifies the disregard for Indigenous women in Canada. According to family members, the option for parole was just one more hurtful response by the legal system that spent years ignoring that women were going missing in low track. And now, another possible injustice. The British Columbia Attorney General has also filed an application to destroy all the evidence from the farm. According to Sasha Reid, who has created a database for Canada's unresolved cases of missing and murdered people, Well, she said this move is just one more blunder in the Pickton serial killer case. When we look at the investigation into the Pickton case, we saw that there were multiple freezers throughout that property, and within several of those freezers, we do know that there were human remains, not just fingerprints, not just trace DNA. Are you telling me that there's no human remains in those applications whatsoever that still need to be tested and identified? I can see why Sasha said those things. She feels the family deserves to know if there is DNA in that evidence, and that means it shouldn't be destroyed. Okay, all of it's piling up, right? We're going to destroy evidence. We've only charged Robert with 6 murders, despite 33 individual DNA and remains of missing women being found on the property, and he also might get to walk free this year. But I have just one more blunder to share in this case. In the last few weeks, a comedy tour has been canceled because of the merchandise they were selling. And you're like, hold up, Mama Jules, what does this have to do with Robert? Well, the shirts that the group were selling had a picture of Robert on the front with the words Pickton Farms. Under the picture were the words, over 50 flavors of hookery smoked bacon. It's as bad as it sounds. The comedy tour was canceled, and the shirts are no longer available online. Now, the civil court system has offered some relief to 13 of the families who claim Robert Pickton killed their loved ones. This was back in 2014, when 13 plaintiffs successfully sued the Vancouver police and the RCMP, claiming they were negligent when they investigated reports of missing sex workers. The settlement in the investigation that the family insists was botched gives $50,000 each to the children of the 13 women. But the settlement also allowed for the police and the RCMP to continue to say that the investigation was thorough. They weren't required to state any responsibility or any failed investigative attempts. Again, the 33 women whose DNA was found at the Pickton farm, and also the dozens more whose disappearances have yet to be explained, well, they deserved better. I hope their children have been able to find better pathways and grow to become successful and fulfilled young adults. Okay, 2 quick updates to cases. Let's talk about the Kaylin Gillis case. This was actually one of the first cases I brought you when I started the podcast. You can head back to June of last year for episode 11 for more specifics, but we now have a conviction and a sentence in the shotgun death of Kaylin. It was April of last year when Kaylin was riding in the front passenger seat with her boyfriend Blake whilst driving. They had traveled to a remote area in Washington County in upstate New York when they lost signal on their phones, which meant they were doing their best to navigate to this party they were headed to without the help of GPS. Well, Blake's vehicle was being trailed by another group of friends headed to the same party. As Blake drove down the wrong driveway, 66-year-old Kevin Monahan took his 20-gauge shotgun and fired twice at the vehicle while standing on his front porch. Kaylin was hit and killed by the second shot fired. And remember, these kids didn't have cell service. So Blake had to drive until they re-entered a coverage area before they could even call 911. The trauma these surviving young people have had to endure because Monahan didn't want people on his property, even if it was accidental, is immense. Well, in January, it took a jury just 2 hours to find Monahan guilty of second-degree murder, reckless endangerment, and tampering with evidence. And he was sentenced on Friday to 25 years to life, and then an additional 1.5 to 4 years for tampering with evidence when he tried to hide the fact that he had fired the shot that killed Kaylin. Now, the judge told Monahan in the sentencing hearing that he really felt like Monahan would fire those shots again if he was presented with the same exact opportunity. He said it was obvious that Monahan felt like he was justified in firing those shots and that he wasn't going to take any responsibility for the outcome of his actions. Now, Monahan declined to speak at the sentencing hearing, which then led to someone in the courtroom yelling "coward" at the man. Now, Kaylin's father spoke at the hearing and told Monahan the following. He said, "You were deceitful. You hid the truth, and you've never shown remorse. Our hope is that your actions will haunt you for the rest of your life." And then Blake, that's Kaylin's boyfriend who was driving the car, well, he told Monahan at the sentencing hearing that he would never be able to forgive him. Kaylin was 20 years old when she was killed by Monahan. And now the second update, in what some are calling an outrageous move. A drunk driver who's been accused of killing a bride on her wedding night by slamming into the golf cart that she was riding in, well, that person has been released on bond. Again, I brought you this story back in May of last year, and if you want a more in-depth telling, you can go back to that one. But here's how it went. On April 28th of 2023, the bride and groom, 34-year-old Samantha Hutchinson and 36-year-old Eric Hutchinson, were riding on the back of a golf cart after they left their Foley Beach wedding party, just returning to their hotel. That's when 25-year-old Jamie Lee Karosi allegedly rammed the golf cart with her Toyota Camry. She was traveling at 65 miles per hour in the 25 mile per hour speed zone. And that night, Jamie tested 3 times the legal limit for her blood alcohol content. Now in South Carolina, when a road has a speed limit of less than 35 miles per hour, a golf cart can travel on that road legally. So the bride and groom were not at fault that night. Samantha died at the scene and Eric was seriously injured. There, Jamie denied being drunk and she refused to test at the scene while acting belligerently with law enforcement. Unfortunately, the family did know this day of release on bail would come. Back in August, when Jamie's attorneys asked for her to be released on bail, the judge denied that request. But he did rule that if the trial was not expedited, that Jamie would be released on March 1st with a $150,000 bail and electronic monitoring. Well, that trial has yet to happen, and Jamie was released Friday. According to the New York Post, Jamie has not quite been that model prisoner over the last 10 months. They say she's complained about the food. She insists upon holding the TV remote and that she can't exercise because she doesn't have a yoga mat. They say she even complained to the point that the rules were bent about visits with her family. See, the policy at the Charleston jail states that family visits should be done via video chat, but the sheriff has allowed Jamie to have in-person visits. Now, a representative from the sheriff's office told the Post that the accommodation was made for Jamie in order to help her in her time of crisis. Now, in jailhouse phone calls, Jamie has been recorded sobbing with her father about how confused she is that this is happening to her. She said in one of the phone calls the following: "Oh my God, I just can't believe this happened to me. Why me? I'm going to be here for years and years and years." Then in another phone call, she referred to the sheriff by her first name because the sheriff allegedly has a relationship with one of her lawyers. Now, the sheriff's office denies that claim. A trial date has still not been set for Jamie, but she does face up to 25 years in jail for the deadly crash. Eric has also filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Jamie and the establishments she visited on that alcohol-filled day. That lawsuit has also not been settled. I'll keep you updated on this trial and when it happens. Well, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. Again, a big thank you to you guys. All of you listeners are really just so wonderful. I especially love your case suggestions. I'm working on a couple of them right now. This job has been so fulfilling for me. So thanks for joining me on this journey. Please, if you love this podcast, tell a friend. And more importantly, it's free to just give a 5-star review. It really helps Oh No Media grow. You can join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.